What's up, nerds? This video is going to be a little bit different today. We're not going to do any code or anything WordPress related. So if you're not interested in that, go ahead and skip this one. There'll be more WordPress stuff next week. I've just been a developer for about 10 years now, and I've just been doing some thinking about kind of how I ended up where I ended up, and just like what are the things that led me to this spot right here that I'm in now. For those who don't know, I'm a lead developer at a fairly large company here in Utah, and it wasn't always that way. I started out in a very different position. And so I was hoping to just kind of use this opportunity to kind of tell my development story, and then maybe you can kind of glean some information out of it. Maybe some stuff you want to copy and help you kind of, do some of the same things I did, maybe get a similar result as me. Or if there's something that, that you just want to steer away from because you don't like kind of where I ended up and that's not really what you want to be doing. So let me give you kind of a background of like what I'm doing currently, and then I will start from the beginning and work my way up to the present time. So currently I am the lead developer at a company called Clearlink, and they are a marketing company, and they own all sorts of different things, but the stuff that I work on is about 12 pretty major brands that run on WordPress, and my job is to lead a team of developers in order to build out the systems that those sites run on. And so it's a very challenging position, very rewarding, and I work with a lot of great people, and I'm very happy with where I am. But just kind of approaching this 10-year mark, it's just caused me to think about, what actually brought me to such a fortunate position. And I mean fortunate in the most genuine term. Like I, make a decent salary, I can support my family, I've got health insurance, like I've got a roof over my head, and, I'm starting to save up, like for retirement and stuff like that. So I feel like I'm in a spot that I always kind of wanted to be in. And so I'm trying to think back of what got me here. And so, I mean, I originally I was always like computer adjacent kind of growing up. I remember my dad bringing home like one of those gateway computers, like the Windows 95 computers, and I like instantly wanted to go on to like those, like a Nickelodeon website where you could like shoot balloons with an arrow, and my dad spent like hours figuring out how to like make that work. I think he had to like install Flash or something like that. It just took him a really long time, but I loved playing it. And I always played computer games and video games, and I was always really interested in that kind of stuff. And I mean, more as like a pastime than like really thinking about the code or anything like that. But eventually I started to think about that kind of stuff as I started playing games like StarCraft and Warcraft. And eventually World of Warcraft, where you could kind of create mods and create little custom games and things like that. And I was like, oh, like that, like people like me are going out there and they're writing something that can make a game, and that's really cool. And I really like that. And so, I mean, I spent my time kind of like toying with that kind of stuff. Never really made anything that was awesome or anything like that. But I would always like to poke around the files that they created and kind of just genuine curiosity with the whole thing. My first like actual experience writing code wasn't until like junior or senior year of high school. I took like a design class at one point, and they it was like 6 of us doing like design things. Like we made like a flyer for the school play and stuff like that. And I got a letter over the summer. So I was like, hey, like you worked on the design team in this class, and we thought you might be interested in going off-site and working on maybe some of these other like tech jobs. And I also maybe think that they sent me that letter because I did really poorly in high school. So like I barely graduated high school, like to the credit. I squeaked by that entire thing. And so maybe they kind of saw that coming and like, maybe you should do a trade job or something like that. Because the school that I ended up doing half day at, I would do half day at my normal high school and half day at this kind of trade school. And There's things like welding and botany and auto repair, and there was also computer repair, and there was 3D design, and then there was software engineering and web development. And I'll give you a guess at which one I ended up in. And so like when I joined there, it was literally half day. So like senior year of high school, like I was pretty lost about what I was going to do after high school, but here I was, I had half day there, was taking just some kind of dumb classes in the morning, and then I would go and drive out to this other place where the last half of the day of school was 100% web development, like HTML, CSS, and basically that was it. We touched a little bit of JavaScript. At that time, it was MooTools. For those who are as old as I am, you know what MooTools is. But that was my first exposure to it, and I actually like genuinely enjoyed it. Like there was some people in there that, you know, I interviewed one of them on my on this channel about how to become a self-taught developer. His name is Mike Payne, and we actually met in that class. He was from another high school, and we kind of buddied up because we actually ended up really liking what we were doing, like writing code, making websites. Like other people were just kind of doing it because it was a pretty easy class overall. Like our teacher was really fun. He was pretty young as well, and so like, and he was kind of learning it at the same time as we were. So everything that we were learning was fresh and coming from the perspective of somebody who is newly learning it, which was really helpful. Shout out to Mr. Kidd. Thank you for all your help. So anyway, like we learned a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS. We did a couple little projects here and there, and kind of learned how to get free hosting from like, you know, charities and stuff like that. And even at one point, like got hired on by the school system, like the school district that we were in, to remake their website. Like my teacher really like put his, you know, neck on the line and says, hey, I've got some students here that are really like liking web development. We need a new website. How about you hire them for minimum wage and let them rebuild the school website? And so like I was just ecstatic because like I was working at a pizza place and also as like a janitor at the time, like in high school. So like any excuse to get rid of those jobs and just do something cool that was a resume builder. I mean, I 100% attribute like a lot of my success afterwards to that exact moment where I was able to quit those two jobs. I didn't really like need the money other than like paying for my car and gas and insurance and stuff like that. I was still living at home, obviously, in high school. So was able to quit those and actually work for the school district, just a couple hours at a time, like super part-time, but I was making minimum wage as a developer, only knowing like HTML and CSS, and barely at that. Like this was extremely stressful, but like me and Mike took it really seriously, and it was really cool to kind of take the stuff that we were learning like that day and put it onto a website that we were then building. So that was a very like, that was a codifying experience for like what I understood web development to be and kind of how I could see it fit into my life. And so being able to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on a very real project on a domain that, you know, is known across the state as, you know, it's a big name. And so it was really cool to be able to do that. And so once like the school year was starting to end, the project was done, you know, lots of cool stuff. Like we did two kind of cool things happen. Number one is there was like a little like tournament, I guess. I mean, it's a nationwide thing, so maybe some of you know about it. It's SkillsUSA, and they had, you know, they have different like events where you can, you know, participate in, and ours, we had to build like a ski school website or something like that and show it off to the a couple of judges, and they would judge it based on all sorts of things. And we didn't end up winning, but it was a very cool experience, and it also kind of showed that, you know, how it kind of like stretched our creativity. I remember that me and Mike ended up using After Effects in our website, where like two ski poles would come in and do like a cool cross, and like the logo would animate and all this kind of stuff. the judges ended up saying it looked way more like a like a tech presentation than like a ski school or whatever. But whatever. I thought it was super cool. Mike thought it was super cool. And, you know, we were very proud of it. So we really also liked doing this kind of stuff outside of the typical, you know, school thing and job. So that happened. And then like I was saying, like the school year was about to end. And then I started looking for jobs. Like I was just planning on, you know, moving out, maybe going to school, and then finding like a full-time job that I could do. And I ended up finding a company about like 45 minutes away from where I lived, maybe even like more like an hour with traffic. And I would do it after school. Like it was a small marketing company. They had no developer. I guess one of the bosses was kind of like a developer, but like didn't want to do it. So they hired me for just barely above minimum wage to take over for them and build out some websites. So I jumped into like pre-existing websites. Some of them were built in Flash. Some of them were HTML and CSS. Some of them were, oh man, there was just stuff all over the place. And I was like, they like basically dropped me on a desk, a super old computer that could barely run Photoshop. And like I installed Notepad++ on there, and I kind of just started to figure it out. They got new clients coming in, and I would be like, you know, at my desk, answering the phone, talking to clients, writing making updates to their websites, building net new projects for new customers, all this kind of stuff. So I really like dove headfirst into it. And I was absolutely stressed out of my mind the entire time. And I worked there for only about 12 months before I stopped. But that entire 12 months, I remember just being like completely overwhelmed. I guess eventually I kind of found my groove, but I was like so excited to be like working in it, and that somebody like took a chance on me. And I think that having that time in school where we're like building stuff, and we actually ended up building like our own website and portfolio and kind of stuff with our little projects on it. But that really got the ball rolling, because now I was like working for an actual company. This wasn't like my teacher like begging to give us a job at the school district. Like I applied for this, interviewed for it, and got it. Now, granted, this is not like, you know, coming out of high school and getting a job at Google or Facebook or like any other thing, you know, entity. But this was, you know, a local marketing company that was like 6 people, and I was their sole developer. So I got to wear a lot of hats, and that came with its stresses, like I said, but it also came with like it was like drinking from a fire hose as far as knowledge goes, because at that time it was just like, you know, uploading stuff to like GoDaddy and Bluehost and working all on the server and SFTP. I was using Coda at the time as well. Like I went from Notepad++ to Coda. And so like I was jamming. But eventually at the end of that 12 months, at the time I was pretty, I guess what everyone's going to know it as Mormon. Not so much anymore, but at the time, like it was expected that if you turned 21, that you would go and be a missionary for the church. And, you know, you probably seen them around, you know, white shirt, black tie, little black name tag, that whole thing. That was me for 2 years. So I worked as a developer for 12 months, and then I quit my job and actually recommended Mike, who I mentioned earlier, and he took over for me. And then I left for 2 years. I didn't do any development for 2 years. And so I was out in Mexico. I was doing church stuff, missionary stuff, and right about 3 months before I was slated to come home back to the United States, I started thinking like, oh man, like what am I going to do when I get back? Like it's been like almost 2 years and I haven't done any sort of web development. I haven't done anything like that. So like, what the heck should I do? And so I was like, I gotta like refresh my mind. And so like, not many people know this, and I would love to chat with you guys more about like this experience, but when you're a missionary, you're not allowed to have like electronics or anything. You're basically just supposed to do church stuff. But I had a pen and paper, and I was like, hey, like, notepad right here, pen and paper, notepad++, like, hey, maybe I can make something, mentally here. And I literally like wrote code on like one of those like pieces of, yellow lined paper. And I would just like try and remember as much as I possibly could, and like refreshing myself on how like websites are made. And like, so I had like literally a piece of paper that had HTML written on it, and another piece of paper that had CSS on it. And I kind of drew out what I thought that would render as. Sounds super stupid, but it was very helpful for me at the time, and helped me refresh my memory. So I come back and, Mike is, still working at, actually had left that job and ended up starting a small agency with his older brother. And so they were taking on lots of, local clients here in Utah, and pretty large size clients that I would say were pretty important. And they weren't hiring at the time. So what did I ended up doing is I ended up marrying my girlfriend and getting a job at eBay as just like a customer service person on the phone. So just solving people's problems there. And I always wanted to like, jump back into web development. I needed to find like another job. And so like I kept talking to Mike and just waiting for that opportunity for something to open up at his agency. And something eventually did. Messaged me one day. I came in for an interview, did an interview with Mike and some of the other people there, and they hired me right there. I gladly turned in my 2 weeks at eBay because customer service is not my jam. Did not like it, and I was back in code. And I realize how extremely fortunate I was to be in that position, because building that relationship and then being able to come back, and it just so happens that he's in a position where he could hire me to an agency that's writing code, and understanding that I just had 2 years of no code time. That was huge, and that I was extremely fortunate to jump into that. And I know that not everybody gets that chance, and so I'm extremely grateful for that. So at that point, like, I now have a commute that's just minutes from my house. It's at this agency, and I'm sitting in front of, like a, 32-inch iMac or whatever the size they were back in, 2012 or whatever. And I was sitting in front of a WordPress installation, and Mike comes and says like, hey, I need you, as the first task is to upload this logo and make it appear. Now, I didn't know any PHP. PHP completely foreign to me. So he just kind of gave me that one task and like have this logo show up, and then also sat me in front of the computer, told me this logo show up, and then just left the room. And I was there for 8 hours trying to figure out, how do I make this logo appear on the page? And it wasn't like, like a theme where you go in and you upload the logo or anything. It was like, no, here's the code editor, here's the logo file, put this, in the header. And so like trying to figure out like how to do that. For some reason, I know exactly what the reason why it was so difficult, because I didn't understand WordPress and I didn't understand PHP. So I'm sitting there trying to like do the relative path to the file, like, and it was real bad. But I remember like at the end of the day, he's like, okay, so how did it go? And I was like, look, here's all the things that I tried. And I showed him like all the things that I had tried. I was like, I don't know, man. Like I was so like embarrassed. I was like, I just don't get this. And then so he's like sat down next to me and he's like, all right, so like, we're going to use a little bit of PHP, and WordPress has its own functions. And so we're going to do git style sheet directory URI. And then from there, that takes us to, essentially this folder. And then you just do the path from there. You go to the logo, and he does it in like under 5 seconds, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so embarrassing. Like I just spent like 8 hours just like floundering. And I remember it to this day, but it was a very like good experience, because number one, it taught me that there's so much more to web development that I didn't know. I knew nothing about WordPress, and now I had something to study. And number 2, ask for help a lot sooner than just waiting for somebody to ask if you need help. Especially if you have a good mentor like I did. So they will gladly help you and bend over backwards to help you out. So that's kind of like, like I really sunk my teeth into that, and having a good mentor was infinitely useful. Through that entire time that I was at that agency, I had Mike there helping me along the way. We had a credit to like buy books and to have, learning resources like lynda.com and all this kind of stuff. And I found, CSStricks.com and all sorts of other websites that taught web development and also had good WordPress resources. And so I spent my time there just trying to just not go through that 8-hour, day again where I just couldn't even upload a logo. Of course that's not gonna happen. I can upload a logo now in under 8 hours. You'll just have to trust me on that. But not having to spend 8 hours to fix a single problem, and having a good foundation in order to, work around, issues and know when to ask for help, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, back to what I was saying, we had a lot of good resources, and I remember, on my Xbox, I was playing Battlefield or whatever, and I was what, I need to really learn some more about WordPress. I've been playing this game for too long. And so just loading up the Xbox browser, going to CSStricks.com and watching full screen videos of Chris Coyer talking about WordPress problems and how he was fixing them. And I was man, this guy is a genius. And second of all, I'm eternally into his debt, because not only is he smart, but he's also recording videos and sharing them with me. I'm man, that is awesome. And all this kind of stuff I can look back to and say that I used at certain points throughout my career. Is all these videos that he was creating were super helpful. And spending that time, my wife thought I was kind of crazy watching just coding videos on our TV and, just sitting on the couch eating chips or whatever. And it's just not even having my computer following along, but just watching it, as if it was a sports game, and just absorbing everything that I could. And so through that, time at that agency, I learned so much, but I was so stressed out at times because, there's a lot of learning going on, and there's that kind of curve that happens when you feel at the very beginning, you're I know how to program. I am a developer, and anything you throw at me, I could figure it out. And then as you learn more, you quickly realize that you know nothing, and that anything that they throw at you is way harder than it sounds at the beginning. And there's so many things that you just don't know. And then all of a sudden you feel well, I shouldn't even have this job because I know nothing. And then you kind of start to learn a little bit more, and you're okay, there's things that I know, there's things that I don't know, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with continuing to learn, and I should be still learning, but knowing my own limits. But towards the end of my time there, I ended up applying to another agency because I really liked the kind of rapid fire workflow that agencies have, and being able to open up a fresh WordPress installation and just start from a blank theme and stuff like that. So I applied to another agency that I knew was using WordPress, so I could build on top of the knowledge that I already had. And I worked for a new agency for 4 years after that. And that was, I learned pretty much everything that I know today from that second job. I guess third job in this case, fourth job if you count the school district, but second real professional job. And I learned everything from doing more enterprise size sites to having to have a project manager and a designer, and all these things managing, hosting platforms, and even eventually building our own images on AWS and stuff like that. Eventually doing headless projects with Angular and Laravel, and holy cow, it was drinking from a fire hose as well. That every job after the last was just a bigger and bigger fire hose, you know what I mean? And that one is like, I gained all of my weight at that job. It was all stressful, and I'm not selling this at all. Like, it sounds like this is something that, you know, it's like I didn't enjoy my time there when I say how stressed I was. But like, the thing is that like I was stressed, but also enjoying it immensely when I was able to build cool things. Like building some things today and like hearing them advertised on the radio here in Utah is one of the coolest things, because I don't work there anymore, but I worked on a project while I was working there that is still being used today and being advertised, and I can see signs for it out, you know, on the highway and stuff like that, which is just, there's no better feeling in that kind of, in this space, like seeing your website that you built like being advertised, and like, oh man, it's so cool. But anyway, worked there 4 years, learned how to work with a team, worked on lots of solo projects, learned how to work on it with, you know, clients again, you know, being on the phone, all that kind of stuff. And then eventually I was reached out to by a recruiter to come meet with the people here at Clearlink. And I was like, and you know what, like, fine, I'll entertain it. Like, it was at one of those times where it's like, I had, you know, bought my first house, this house that I'm at right now, my first house. There is no second house. This is the only house that I've ever lived in on my own. And so the recruiter said, hey, you know, like, we're like here in Salt Lake City, you know, why don't you stop by on your way home? So I was, you know, 30 minutes south of Salt Lake City at my job. I drove up, and then because it's on my way home, and met with the team here, and they basically offered me a job that day once they kind of figured out, you know, like that I was a good fit. They were opening an agency wing in the company, and they wanted a senior developer to kind of lead it. And the funny thing is that I had made like 2 videos. If you go back to like on my YouTube channel, the very first 2 videos that I had made before I did this interview, and that was part of like my pitch to them, is like, look, I know what I'm doing. Like, here, I'm making videos about what I'm learning and some stuff that I know. And that was really impressive because it showed how I can explain things to junior devs. It showed that my knowledge was pretty on par with what they were looking for, and that I was comfortable speaking, that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, among other things, that was, I mean, with all that experience that I had, I was a good fit, and they just offered me a really good salary and, you know, benefits and all this kind of stuff. And it was huge, because at that point I joined a company that, you know, had thousands of people and not dozens. And all of a sudden I was taking on, you know, large projects, and I had to decide stuff. Like, I wasn't just kind of following my director saying like, oh, here's what we use here, and, you know, this is the kind of stack that we're using, and this is our process, here's how we spin up a local environment. It's like, ooh, all of a sudden I have to make it, and all of a sudden I have to think of like how I'm going to onboard new developers, because I started out as the only one and had to hire on, I think we had 2 more that ended up hiring onto that team, and we had to figure all that kind of stuff out. But it's all, you know, they needed somebody who knew WordPress, and they wanted to make websites for new clients that were going to be on WordPress. And eventually I switched off of that team and on to the team that I'm at right now, which even like stacked on top of that, my current knowledge, and I needed to start thinking about enterprise stuff. And now instead of 2 developers, I think about even more developers. And instead of about 1 site at a time, I had to think about 12 sites at a time. And what am I going to do to, you know, roll out components and changes to all these kind of sites? And you guys have kind of seen peaks of like what I'm doing at work in the videos that I create. And so like, ultimately, kind of looking back as to kind of how I got here, there was a lot of like kind of blood, sweat, and tears that went in behind the scenes. And I know how like fortunate I am to like have made certain connections to get my start, because that is the hardest part of everything about getting in as a developer, is getting your start. But the phrase that I really like to quote to myself is that luck favors the prepared. And so if you feel like you're just getting lucky, also look back and see how prepared you've been for those situations that you have been offered. If you end up putting in a lot of work to be a good developer and to work really hard, showing up on time, putting in the hours, managing yourself and your burnout, and what are you doing after hours to learn, and are you just are you a 901 to 459 kind of person? And sometimes that's fine, but other times it kind of shows like how you actually feel about the work that you're doing. And so like when I look back and say like, oh, I'm offered all of these positions and like I've gotten every job that I've applied for, I think some of it has to do with that stuff that, the time that I put in at home and during work hours, and it's something that I found that I genuinely enjoy, and it's ultimately led me to a spot where I went from, junior developer at that first agency to senior developer in my last department here to lead developer in this department that I'm at. And I'm starting to work on higher level items, more complicated items, and then starting to think more about the people aspect of things. And that's kind of a typical cookie cutter trajectory for a lot of people, but that's something that I am looking forward to, is kind of, eventually getting to the point where I can focus on helping other people learn about the stuff that I've learned about, and being able to pass on that knowledge and learn from them, and still always having, a foot in the game, but eventually wanting to focus on people and making, and like kind of higher level, like building out large scale projects and kind of planning and doing all that cool stuff that, my bosses always got to do. And then I can kind of spend my time on like smaller projects like freelance or these YouTube videos and things like that. But overall, like, I just wanted to kind of reminisce for a minute about, I have no idea how long this video is. Sorry if you're still here and you're bored out of your mind thinking that something else is coming, but no, this is just wanted to do another kind of stream of consciousness video. I don't expect this video to get a lot of views. There's not a lot here, but it sure helps to kind of get that out there from me, and hopefully you can kind of glean some sort of information for yourself. Ultimately, if I were to kind of boil it down into a couple bullet points, is that you never know like where like your coworkers are going to end up. So if you're in school, build relationships, stay in touch with those people who are passionate like you are. Same with coworkers. Like, my freelance stuff is 100% because of like designers that I've met throughout my career, like taking on like roles where you're working with design a lot and marketing managers a lot and project managers a lot. Like, those kind of people, everybody has connections to everybody else. And so like if you are working with a designer a lot, usually they have freelance stuff that they're doing already, and they'll bring you in as, a trial, and then you can start working on more there. And same with project managers, they work with other people or have their own projects that they want to work on, and so you can jump in there. All of my freelance stuff has been like that. And even like the current freelance project that I'm working on now is like the CEO of our company had like a nonprofit site that he worked on, and so he messaged my boss to like ask all of your engineers like who'd be open to doing that work, and I just immediately said like I would be happy to do that. And I got to meet the CEO of my company on like a personal level, and then one of the designers that he worked with on the project has had other projects, and so I'm still working on those projects today. So like that kind of relationship building is way more important than making sure that you have like a good portfolio and you have good like SEO, I guess, on your personal projects. Like, that's where most clients come from, is just personal relationships that you've ended up creating. So taking that seriously and putting, saying yes to projects, even when they're scary, super scary, like working directly for your CEO outside of work, that kind of stuff. And then just always being hungry, always, finding the stuff that you're passionate about, and sticking with it. Like, I mean, WordPress kind of found me, and I just kind of fell in love with it back, and it's provided a ton of great opportunities for me. So I'm really happy with that. And, you know, ultimately I hope to give back to every in the same way that I saw like Chris Coyer give back, and just make video tutorials for people who want to learn about WordPress, and hopefully inspire them to do the same at some point. So hopefully this can kind of be like a pay it forward kind of thing. So I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you for listening to my rambling. If you want to hear more about any particular piece of my development story, please leave a comment. Let me know. If you didn't like this video, let me know as well. You can tweet at me very angrily if you so desire, and we'll talk about it. So anyway, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one.